Saturday mornings in the 70s meant turning on the television and entering worlds that made absolutely no sense. Living hats. Talking sea monsters. Dinosaurs that moved like they were stuck in molasses. Network executives seemed willing to greenlight anything with bright colors. And kids didn't question it. If you grew up in that era, these shows weren't just weird. Welcome to Comedalgia. Make sure to hit subscribe and ring that bell now. Let's get into it.
Unmatched in the annals of magicdom today!
No, Ronji, don't!
No, get away from that!
Number 10, Lidsville. Premiering in September 1971 as a single season, 17-episode venture on ABC, before moving to NBC for reruns, Sid and Marty Krofft's live-action series Lidsville emerged as perhaps their most profoundly eccentric creation yet, a high bar to clear for the legendary puppeteer team that had already thoroughly bewildered and delighted audiences with the strange landscape of H.R. Pufnstuf. The show followed a teenage boy named Mark, played by Butch Patrick, who landed the gig fresh from his iconic role as the fanged Eddie Munster on the hit sitcom The Munsters. During a standard magic performance, Mark accidentally tumbles into a magician's bottomless top hat and plummets through a portal into a surreal parallel world, populated entirely by living headwear. In this strange society, every character's personality perfectly matched its style. The cowboy hat drawled with a Western accent, the policeman hat rigidly enforced the local rules, and the witch hat constantly cackled. The main source of conflict was the green-faced villain Horatio J. Hoodoo, played with frantic, manic energy by the legendary comedic actor Charles Nelson Riley. Hoodoo soared through the skies in his signature flying vessel, the Hatamaran, regularly zapping the innocent hat citizens with magic bolts and extorting them for an arbitrary fee known as the hat tax. The plot truly ignites when Mark helps Hoodoo's captive genie, Weenie, portrayed with over-the-top theatricality by Billy Hayes, who brought the same screeching intensity she used for Witchy Poo in H.R. Pufnstuf Escape from Captivity. This act of rebellion prompts a vengeful Hoodoo to make it his personal mission to recapture them both and prevent Mark from ever returning home. The catch was that Weenie was thoroughly incompetent, meaning nearly all of his magic spells backfired or accomplished nothing useful, which didn't stop Mark from relying on him episode after episode as a running joke of perpetual chaos. Behind the scenes, however, production was a miserable ordeal. Butch Patrick has been incredibly candid in interviews about how much he loathed every day on set, particularly as a teenage actor trying to establish his identity beyond his Munsters fame. The television studio was constantly blasted by sweltering, high-intensity lights, and the actors were forced to wear thick, suffocating foam padding underneath their highly uncomfortable costumes, turning the stage into an oven. Logistically, the production was a massive headache for the Krofft brothers. Because the premise of the show was so hyper-specific, they were completely unable to reuse or recycle any costumes from their previous television ventures, forcing them to design and manufacture every single talking hat character entirely from scratch. Furthermore, the producers made the highly unusual creative choice to have the voice actors record all of their character dialogue live on the active set, rather than cleanly dubbing the audio later in a quiet post-production studio. This choice caused constant, perpetual confusion during scenes. The performers trapped inside the massive, bulky foam costumes had severely restricted vision and hearing, meaning they often had absolutely no idea when their specific character was supposed to be talking or which hat was currently delivering a line.
My pal Freddy, he's the only talking fruit in the world.
Please, Jimmy, squeeze the water out of me.
Number 9, H.R. Pufnstuf. Although it officially made its television debut in the autumn of 1969, Sid and Marty Krofft's live-action curiosity, H.R. Pufnstuf, truly bled into the cultural fabric of the early 1970s, through relentless, years-long weekend morning reruns, effectively setting the definitive, undeniably bizarre template for the entire decade's strangest children's programming. This surreal television experiment introduced unsuspecting young viewers to a parallel universe known as Living Island, a vibrant land where a massive, friendly, cowboy boot-wearing dragon named H.R. Pufnstuf served as the local mayor, and where the defining characteristic of the environment was that absolutely everything, including the trees, the boats, and the houses, possessed human faces, distinct consciousness, and the ability to talk. The human anchor of this chaotic fantasy world was a young British boy named Jimmy, portrayed by Jack Wilde, fresh off his Oscar-nominated success in Oliver, who finds himself stranded on the island after his magical, gold-plated, talking flute named Freddy actively convinces him to hop aboard a mysterious boat that turns out to be an elaborate trap engineered by Witchy Poo, the island's resident cackling antagonist, brought to life with absolute, gleeful, and screeching villainy by the legendary Billy Hayes. Witchy Poo wanted nothing more than to claim Freddie the Flute for her own wicked collection, spending the entirety of every single episode scheming to snatch the instrument away from Jimmy. The show's heavy, unapologetic psychedelic aesthetic was utterly impossible for viewers to ignore, as bright, loudly clashing primary colors covered every visible surface, and massive character costumes created a screen perpetually crowded with anthropomorphic entities like talking mushrooms, singing alarm clocks, and dancing flora that looked less like traditional puppets and more like vivid fever dreams. Looking back at the footage through a modern lens, it is incredibly easy to see why bewildered parents in 1969 openly wondered if the show's creators were indulging in mind-altering substances significantly stronger than standard morning coffee. Each half-hour block followed a highly predictable, formulaic narrative pattern, where Witchy Poo would hatch an overly complicated plot to steal Freddie. Jimmy and his giant dragon friend Pufnstuf would inevitably outsmart her, and she would ultimately flee back into the sky on her motorized flying broomstick, the Vroom Broom, cackling wildly while shouting empty promises of absolute revenge during the next episode. Despite the highly repetitive nature of these storylines, young audiences simply could not get enough of the predictable conflict. Even though the show only produced a single season of 17 original episodes, they aired in continuous loops throughout the early 70s, introducing a steady stream of new viewers to Living Island's bizarre charms. The mastermind puppeteer brothers, Sid and Marty Krofft, actually stumbled into the concept entirely by accident, after developing the core characters and vibrant visual style for a live, walk-through attraction at the 1968 Hemisphere International Exposition in San Antonio, Texas. Upon seeing the public's enthusiastic reaction, they realized the property could seamlessly translate to the small screen, creating a rigid structural blueprint that they would faithfully follow for years to come. A bright color palette, a relatable kid protagonist, a magical parallel world, a thoroughly incompetent villain, and production values that managed to look distinctively cheap and theatrical even by the lower standards of 70s television. What they created quickly transcended the boundaries of a simple weekend morning broadcast, spawning a full-length feature film in 1970, a massive traveling live stage show, and a lucrative mountain of tie-in merchandise. This immense commercial success ultimately proved that children did not mind the overwhelming weirdness of the production at all. Rather than being pushed away by the eccentricities, they completely and enthusiastically embraced it.
Where am I?
Welcome to Tranquility Forest.
Number 8. The Bugaloos. In late 1970, the creative powerhouse of Sid and Marty Krofft struck the Saturday morning airwaves once again with the debut of the Bugaloos, a live-action children's series centered around 4 British teenagers who sported insect wings, lived in a magical woodland, and performed together as a localized rock and roll band. If that bizarre premise sounds as though someone took the musical antics of the Monkees, the flying fantasy of Peter Pan, and the backdrop of a vibrant nature documentary and threw them all into a high-speed blender, you are actually not very far off from the reality of the production. The musical group consisted of 4 core members named IQ, John Philpott, Harmony Wayne Larea, Courage John McIndoe, and Joy Caroline Ellis. All 4 wore prominent antennae and highly glittery, insect-inspired jumpsuits while performing incredibly upbeat pop songs and literally flying through the air around their hidden woodland sanctuary, which was appropriately named Tranquility Forest. Their vocal harmonies were actually remarkably tight and pleasant to listen to, which made perfect sense given that the Krofft brothers had specifically selected professional young musicians who could actually sing and perform rather than just hiring standard actors to lip-sync. The primary nemesis of this musical insect troupe was a thoroughly unhinged villainous character named Benita Bizarre, who was portrayed with absolute comedic gusto by the veteran Hollywood actress and singer Martha Raye. In the lore of the show, Benita Bizarre was a washed-up, completely untalented singer who was hopelessly obsessed with reclaiming her long-lost fame and becoming a global superstar once again. Operating a massive jukebox empire from her imposing mechanical headquarters, she spent the entirety of every single episode launching devious plots to kidnap the Bugaloos so she could somehow steal their genuine musical talent and exploit it for her own career resurrection. To aid her in these ridiculous endeavors, she relied on an equally eccentric roster of sidekicks, which included Funky Rat, a giant rodent minion who spoke exclusively in rhyming, fast-paced jive slang along with Woofer and Tweeter, 2 bumbling, canine-like creature chauffeurs who drove her around and consistently botched her evil assignments. Much like its predecessor series, The show only managed to last for a single season, consisting of 17 original episodes, with this unique British-American production featuring highly polished music handled by La La Productions, yielding incredibly catchy songs that young kids would absent-mindedly hum long after the Saturday morning broadcasts had concluded. The Bugaloos performed several distinct musical numbers in the middle of each episode, which effectively gave the show the energetic feel of a classic variety program, seamlessly mixed with a high-concept fantasy adventure. Looking back at the archival footage today, the makeup and character costumes were simultaneously highly creative and deeply unsettling, as Benita Bizarre's incredibly heavy, exaggerated face paint and wild, towering wigs made her look far more like a terrifying Halloween costume than a traditional children's show character. Furthermore, the Bugaloos' flying wings were clearly constructed from basic fabric and visibly supported by obvious wires dangling from the ceiling. But the young audience watching at home did not care about the low-budget effects. They simply wanted to believe in the magical concept of teenagers who possessed the ability to fly.
All right, stifle.
Number 7. Sigmund and the Sea Monsters. In September 1973, the creative mastermind brothers Sid and Marty Krofft shifted their focus from fantasy islands to the sunny coast of Southern California with the premiere of Sigmund and the Sea Monsters. This live-action Saturday morning series followed the misadventures of Sigmund, a sweet-natured sea monster who completely rejected his family's underwater lifestyle. Instead of scaring humans like a proper ocean beast, Sigmund sought friendship and was adopted by two young brothers, Johnny and Scott Stewart, who discovered him washed up on a beach. The boys smuggled the gentle, lumpy creature into their backyard clubhouse, setting up a continuous struggle to keep him hidden from the human world and his own underwater relatives. Sigmund's dysfunctional biological family served as the primary comedic villains of the show, consisting of an overbearing mother named Sweet Mama, a demanding father named Big Daddy, and his dim-witted brothers Blurp and Slurp. Living in a nearby ocean cave, this monstrous household spent every episode searching the coastline to drag Sigmund home and force him to be frightening. The monster suits were wonderfully ridiculous, featuring lumpy green foam bodies, bulging eyes, and floppy seaweed-like tentacles. While technically supposed to be menacing, the actual physical execution made them look more like rejected props from a local children's theater production than genuine ocean terrors. Sigmund himself was written as an endearing coward, who preferred eating seaweed and hanging out with Johnny, played by Johnny Whitaker, and Scott, played by Scott Colden, over scaring beachgoers. To bring the character to life, the production hired the famous actor Billy Barty, who injected immense warmth and physical comedy into the role, despite being completely encased in a sweltering foam rubber suit. Each half-hour episode followed a reliable pattern where Sigmund would get into a domestic mishap, his bumbling family would show up looking for him, and the boys would hatch a frantic plan to resolve the chaos, with everyone learning a gentle lesson about friendship or honesty by the end. The recognizable Southern California beach setting gave the show a completely different feel from the Kroffts' earlier, studio-bound productions. Because it was set in the real world, the sight of lumpy green monsters hiding behind rocks while regular pedestrians walked by in the background made the premise look wonderfully absurd. Broadcasting on NBC from 1973 to 1975, the show became a definitive staple of 70s television. Its lasting nostalgic appeal was solidified decades later when Amazon Studios officially revived the property for a new generation in 2016, proving that even the strangest concepts from the Krofft brothers' library could endure.
Are you all right?
Yeah.
Now, why did you do that? You could have been killed.
Because if I didn't, he could have been eaten.
Number 6. Land of the Lost. In September 1974, Sid and Marty Krofft ventured away from their traditional slapstick comedy format to premiere Land of the Lost, a live-action series that immediately stood completely apart from typical Saturday morning fare. Instead of delivering gentle moral lessons, cuddly puppets, and silly costumes, this ambitious production offered genuine science fiction concepts, darker narrative tones, and special effects that ranged from surprisingly effective stop-motion to laughably cheap sets. The storyline follows the Marshall family, composed of park ranger Rick and his two children, Will and Holly, who accidentally plunge through a massive dimensional portal during a routine river rafting trip and find themselves stranded in a prehistoric valley. This hidden world is filled with towering dinosaurs, mysterious ancient technology, and highly hostile creatures, forcing the family to camp out in a natural cave, strictly ration their dwindling supplies, and spend 3 entire seasons trying to decipher a way back home. The foundational premise was accessible enough for young kids to easily follow, Yet, the unfolding mystery was complex enough to keep them deeply engaged week after week. What truly set the series apart was that it took itself incredibly seriously in ways most children's programming of the era simply didn't. To construct the scripts, the Krofft brothers hired actual, established science fiction authors such as Larry Niven, Ben Bova, and D.C. Fontana, who brought mature genre sensibilities to the writer's room. These authors built an intricate, overarching mythology involving mysterious golden time portals called pylons, ancient crystal technology left behind by a vanished civilization called the Altrusians, and complex time paradoxes that required real intellectual thought to follow. The individual episodes consciously refused to talk down to young viewers. Instead, they presented genuine, high-concept science fiction and trusted the kids at home to keep up with the complicated rules of the universe. The dinosaurs inhabiting the valley were brought to life through painstaking stop-motion animation, which gave the creatures a distinctive, jerky movement style. However, young viewers did not care that the massive Tyrannosaurus Rex, they affectionately nicknamed Grumpy, moved in stilted increments, because the underlying threat felt entirely real. Even more terrifying were the Sleestacks, sluggish, lizard-like humanoids who guarded the ruins of the lost city and were genuinely creepy due to their haunting, collective hissing vocalizations and slow, menacing movements. These were not bumbling villains or cuddly monsters. They were inherently dangerous, hostile captors, and the show never let the audience forget the high stakes of a potential encounter with them. The production's dedication to world-building went so far that they actually commissioned a complete, functioning language for the Pakuni, the primitive, ape-like hominids who inhabited the prehistoric land. Linguist Victoria Frumkin designed a custom, 300-word vocabulary based on West African speech patterns, and the show gradually taught viewers this fictional language over multiple episodes, adding an organic, educational element to the weekly adventure. Kids at home could actually learn to translate and speak Pakuni if they paid close attention to the dialogue, which many dedicated fans proudly did.
Their toughest guy wants to meet our toughest guy in the alley right now.
Gosh, Fleeg, what'll we do?
Number 5. The Banana Splits Adventure Hour. In September 1968, the Banana Splits Adventure Hour made its grand debut on NBC, and though its original production wrapped by 1970, the series remained in heavy syndication rotation throughout the early 70s, establishing itself as an absolute staple of the decade's Saturday morning lineup. The show was hosted by 4 massive, anthropomorphic animals dressed in vibrant rock and roll costumes: Fleagle the Beagle, Bingo the Gorilla, Drooper the Lion, and Snorky the Elephant. Together, this fictional band spearheaded a fast-paced variety show format that seamlessly blended live-action, slapstick comedy, serialized adventure segments, and genuinely catchy musical performances. The costumed characters themselves existed in a strange visual space that was simultaneously appealing and deeply unsettling. Their oversized foam heads, bulging, unblinking eyes, and permanent, stitched-on grins created a distinct, uncanny valley effect that some children found utterly charming, while others found it mildly disturbing. Between the show's various animated shorts, the Splits could be seen driving around amusement parks in their custom, psychedelic 6-wheeled vehicles known as banana buggies, while engaging in high-energy, pie-in-the-face physical comedy. Beyond the antics of the main hosts, the program was highly celebrated for its live-action, serialized adventure segments, which went on to become major cult favorites. Most notably, the segment titled Danger Island was directed by Richard Donner, years before he achieved Hollywood superstardom, directing blockbuster films like Superman and The Goonies. This thrilling serial followed a group of explorers and castaways trying to survive on a remote island while being relentlessly pursued by bloodthirsty pirates, famously popularizing the dramatic catchphrase, "Oh, Chongo." The show also featured animated offerings, including the Arabian Nights, which detailed a heroic band of rebels battling an evil sultan, and an animated retelling of the Three Musketeers that adapted the classic literary tale specifically for young television viewers. The Banana Splits functioned as a legitimate bubblegum pop musical act, performing several highly produced tracks during each episode, including their impossibly catchy signature theme song, the Tra-La-La Song 1, Banana, 2 Banana. The track features a repetitive, hypnotic chorus that permanently burrowed into the brains of young viewers, and never truly left pop culture history. The music was actually of remarkably high quality because it was overseen by music industry professionals who knew exactly how to construct infectious hooks that kids would remember for decades. This musical output was wrapped in a hyper-saturated, psychedelic aesthetic that captured the transition from the late 1960s to the early 1970s perfectly. filling the screen with blinding colors and a chaotic set design that looked as though it had been modeled after a manic trip to a candy factory. Everything on the screen moved at a frantic pace, jumping rapidly between different segments to keep the viewing energy at maximum levels at all times.
Come on, Junior! Come on, let's escape!
Number 4. Far Out Space Nuts. In September 1975, comedy veteran Bob Denver, fresh from his career-defining success as the titular bumbling castaway on Gilligan's Island, returned to Saturday morning television with Far Out Space Nuts. Produced by Sid and Marty Krofft for CBS, the live-action series operated on a wonderfully ridiculous hypothetical premise, essentially asking what would happen if you took the reliable Gilligan's Island storytelling formula and launched it directly into deep space, backed by even cheaper production values. Denver portrayed Junior, a clumsy NASA ground crewman who, alongside his equally inept colleague Barney, played by veteran actor Chuck McCann, accidentally launched themselves into the cosmos while loading food and supplies onto a parked rocket ship. The entire cosmic mishap occurred because Junior mistook a button labeled "Launch" for lunch, and during the confusion, the duo completely butchered the standard countdown sequence. Instead of counting down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, they mistakenly read the manual as 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, triggering an immediate engine ignition that sent them hurtling helplessly through the galaxy. The narrative structure of the show followed the bumbling pair as they accidentally crashed onto a brand new planet each week, encountering bizarre alien life forms and inevitably getting caught up in high-energy slapstick situations. To round out the cast, they were joined by a loyal companion named Honk, a furry, multi-eyed alien creature who communicated exclusively by honking a horn embedded in his snout. The physical production was delightfully low budget, as every alien world they visited looked suspiciously like a cramped Southern California soundstage, dressed with a few lumpy foam rocks and incredibly cheap cardboard props. The special effects were strictly bargain basement, even by the relaxed standards of mid-70s children's programming, featuring spaceships that dangled from clearly visible wires and extraterrestrial monsters that were obviously just background actors stuffed into ill-fitting, wrinkled rubber costumes. Conveniently for a show with absolutely no budget to depict authentic space environments, every single planet they crashed on possessed perfect Earth-like gravity and a completely breathable atmosphere, allowing the prop department to build sets primarily using spray paint, styrofoam, and whatever surplus materials they could buy at the local hardware store. Denver brought his trademark brand of physical comedy to the role of Junior, constantly mugging for the camera, performing exaggerated double takes, and taking dramatic pratfalls with the exact same frantic energy he had displayed on the uncharted island years prior. The underlying narrative formula was entirely identical to his previous sitcom success. Bumbling characters find themselves trapped in an escalating predicament, concoct a series of harebrained schemes to escape, fail spectacularly for 20 minutes, and then blindly stumble into an accidental solution right before the end credits rolled. If you had watched a single episode of Gilligan's Island, you had essentially witnessed this exact narrative structure dozens of times before, just stripped of its tropical aesthetic and swapped for a sci-fi outer space theme. Ultimately, the show only managed to last for a single season, consisting of 15 original episodes, airing on CBS from September 1975 to May 1976, before quickly disappearing into syndication obscurity. Unlike some of its contemporary Krofft productions from that era, Far Out Space Nuts never managed to develop a massive cult following or a lasting nostalgia factor among adults, largely because it was viewed as far too derivative of Denver's earlier work and far too cheaply produced, even for a generation of viewers that routinely tolerated low production values. Still, for the young children who eagerly tuned in on Saturday mornings, the brief series provided simple, comforting laughs. Bob Denver's innate comedic charm successfully carried the incredibly weak scripts, and the sheer absurdity of the premise possessed its own unique, low-rent appeal, proving that you didn't necessarily need sophisticated special effects or high-budget CGI to enjoy watching two lovable goofballs bounce around fake styrofoam planets and get into trouble.
Get a look at Gruesome Gulch from the air. All right!
Number 3. Wonderbug. In September 1976, Sid and Marty Krofft expanded their television empire with the debut of the Krofft Super Show, an umbrella variety package that included a highly memorable live-action segment called Wonderbug. This fast-paced superhero parody centered around three teenagers, Barry, CC, and Susan, and their incredibly magical Rust, covered dune buggy named Schleppcar, which possessed the hidden ability to transform into a shiny, crime-fighting superhero vehicle named Wonderbug. When the teens were just driving around town, the vehicle appeared to be nothing more than a completely worthless, beat-up old jalopy that looked ready for the junkyard. However, whenever the trio encountered trouble, they would simply blow a magical horn, prompting Schleppcar to instantly transform via incredibly obvious jump cuts and abrupt changes in camera angles into Wonderbug, a powerful, gleaming vehicle complete with a distinct face, expressive eyes, and the ability to communicate entirely through a series of horn honks and electronic beeps. The teenage trio utilized Wonderbug's unique capabilities to solve local crimes and assist people in distress, usually spending their half-hour blocks battling bumbling, low-level criminals who seemed far more confused by the situation than actually dangerous. Bizarrely, the show's primary recurring villain was named Evel Knievel, a blatant, shameless fictional rip-off of the famous real-life motorcycle daredevil Evel Knievel, who appeared in multiple segments to cause deliberate civic mayhem that the teens and their motorized companion had to thwart. The special effects utilized for these weekly adventures were minimal at best, as Wonderbug's mid-road transformations were accomplished through crude, rapid film edits that fooled absolutely nobody in the audience. The vehicle's actual face was permanently painted directly onto the front hood, utilizing the standard headlights for eyes and the front metal grille for a mouth. Whenever the car needed to express a specific emotion, the camera would simply zoom in tight on these static features, while comical cartoon sound effects blared over the audio track. In total, the production team only manufactured 16 individual Wonderbug segments to air as part of the larger Krofft Super Show broadcast package during the mid-70s. While the series was certainly not sophisticated, complex, or particularly well made by Hollywood standards, it effortlessly possessed the exact same campy, low-budget charm that defined the rest of the Krofft brothers' catalog. The underlying premise was simple enough for young children to follow without any effort. The weekly adventures offered harmless, lighthearted fun, and Wonderbug himself was given just enough mechanical personality through physical acting to make viewers genuinely care about the fate of a modified dune buggy. Looking back at the show today, it is impossible not to view Wonderbug as a blatant, low-budget attempt by the studio to capitalize on the massive success of Hanna-Barbera's animated hit Speed Buggy and other popular anthropomorphic vehicle programs of the era. Nevertheless, in the specific context of Saturday morning television in 1976, the live-action car fit right in with the landscape, providing easy entertainment for kids who watched it, enjoyed the silly stunts, and happily moved on without ever questioning the logic of a thinking, feeling automobile.
Oh, zephyr winds which blow on high, lift me now so I can fly.
Number 2. The Secrets of Isis. In September 1975, Filmation Associates expanded the live-action landscape of Saturday morning children's television with the premiere of The Secrets of Isis, a show that gave young viewers something incredibly rare for the era, a powerful female superhero as the absolute lead character. The narrative followed Andrea Thomas, a dedicated high school science teacher who discovered an ancient, mystical amulet during an archaeological dig in Egypt that granted her the incredible ability to transform into the powerful Egyptian goddess Isis. By holding her heirloom aloft and reciting the iconic incantation, "Oh, mighty eyes," the ordinary schoolteacher would instantly transform into a superhero with total command over the natural world. She could manipulate the elements, communicate directly with animals, and display incredible superhuman strength. The show was paired with another live-action comic book adaptation, Shazam, to form the highly successful Shazam, Isis Hour on CBS, creating a dominant block of superhero programming. Actress Joanna Cameron portrayed both sides of the character, bringing immense warmth, intelligence, and authority to the dual role. As Andrea Thomas, she was depicted as a deeply caring, relatable educator who connected naturally with her teenage students, while as Isis, she became a towering, regal figure who used her godlike abilities to solve community crises and impart moral wisdom. Each episode typically featured students from her high school getting into dangerous predicaments, usually through poor judgment or peer pressure rather than actual criminal intent, and Isis would intervene to save the day while gently helping them see the error of their ways. The special effects utilized for these weekly rescues were limited but highly effective for mid-70s television, depicting Isis flying through the air via obvious blue screen overlays, while her magical powers were visualized using practical camera tricks, stock footage of wild animals and stormy weather, and creative film editing. Her signature white and gold outfit, complete with a flowing cape, matching tiara, and the central amulet, managed to look appropriately mythological and heroic without being overly theatrical or impractical for action scenes. What truly made the series stand out from other contemporary action shows was its deliberate, highly structured, educational approach to storytelling. Each half-hour episode famously concluded with Joanna Cameron, dressed as Isis, addressing the viewing audience directly from the screen, breaking character slightly to explain the specific moral or safety lesson the kids at home should take away from the story. The program actively promoted positive civic values, like absolute honesty, personal responsibility, and individual courage, while successfully giving young girls a strong, intelligent superhero they could genuinely admire and emulate. The Secrets of Isis ran for 2 full seasons and produced 22 original episodes, breaking ground for its time and predating the modern wave of female-led superhero media by several decades. Joanna Cameron became an instant role model for a generation of young girls who rarely saw women occupying independent action roles, leaving behind a proud cultural legacy that heavily influenced later televised heroines and proved to Hollywood that women could be just as powerful, commanding, and heroic as their male counterparts.
Who's gonna know?
Number 1. The Skatebirds. In September 1977, as the Krofft brothers continued their undisputed dominance over weekend children's programming, they introduced the Skatebirds, a live-action variety series centered around 3 massive, anthropomorphic birds who zipped around on roller skates. The avian trio consisted of Knock Knock, the woodpecker, Scooter the penguin, and Satchel the pelican, who were joined on screen by their human companion, Mickey. Together, this eccentric cast hosted a fast-paced, hour-long variety block on CBS, performing slapstick comedy sketches and goofy transitions between the show's various animated and live-action sub-segments. The entire production was staged on an elaborate, colorful set that looked like a surreal cross between an urban skateboard park and a tropical bird sanctuary. The character costumes represented peak Krofft weirdness, featuring oversized fiberglass bird heads, exaggerated facial features, brightly dyed faux fur bodies, and frozen, permanent expressions that managed to look simultaneously childish and slightly creepy. The addition of roller skates beneath the bulky suits added a supreme layer of structural absurdity, prompting the obvious logical question of why birds would ever need roller skates when they possessed wings to fly. The show, however, never bothered to explain this detail, and the young audience watching at home certainly never asked. The program functioned as an umbrella broadcast, housing several distinct serialized segments that provided the actual story content for the hour, while the main bird crew supplied the comedic relief. These segments included Wonder Wheels, an animated short about a teenager whose beat-up motorcycle could transform into a heroic crime-fighting vehicle, and Mystery Island, a live-action adventure serial that featured a stranded family dodging dinosaurs, mad scientists, and jungle dangers. Between these cartoons, the live-action Skatebirds segments treated viewers to energetic, highly physical slapstick routines, usually involving elaborate choreographed pratfalls on their roller skates or sweeping, pantomimed misunderstandings about everyday human behavior. The show was introduced by a characteristically upbeat, fast-paced theme song that promised endless adventures and wild fun with the feathered crew, cementing a general sense of high-energy chaos that somehow managed to hold itself together for the duration of the broadcast. Ultimately, the Skatebirds only managed to last for a single season, consisting of 16 original episodes, broadcasting from September 1977 to January 1978, before quickly vanishing into syndication obscurity. Unlike contemporary Krofft masterpieces like Land of the Lost or Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, this particular avian variety hour never quite managed to develop a passionate, lasting cult following among adults. In retro-analysis, the show simply wasn't weird enough to be memorably bizarre, nor was it narratively strong enough to be fondly remembered by the masses. Still, for the millions of kids who caught the broadcasts during their brief original network run, the series represented a quintessential, highly comforting Saturday morning experience. It delivered simple comedy, animated heroism, and an overall chaotic charm that fit right into the cultural landscape of the mid to late 70s. That absolute suspension of disbelief was the true, enduring magic of 70s children's television. The programming asked you to believe in the impossible, and for a few hours every Saturday morning, you completely did. The shows never paused to explain their internal logic, nor did they ever apologize to the public for their inherent weirdness. They simply presented their bizarre, constructed worlds with absolute, unwavering confidence and invited you to come along for the ride. Millions of children across the country enthusiastically accepted that exact invitation every single weekend, creating a massive, deeply connected shared experience for an entire generation of youth. On Monday mornings at school, schoolyards would buzz as kids passionately discussed what had happened on the latest episode of Land of the Lost, or debated whether poor Sigmund would ever be accepted by his monstrous family. In an era long before the advent of digital streaming, on-demand media, or hundreds of specialized cable channels, Saturday morning television wasn't just background noise, it was a major cultural event. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more nostalgic content from the 70s and beyond. What was your favorite weird show from this era? Let us know in the comments below.